perfect timing. Today was my first day of my inner moon coming, and my blood is very deep red. And also, I'm very happy that after the last 4 years since starting this journey, the symptoms of having the period, when it came to having some pain, and normally I would need to take some ibuprofen the first few days. Actually, the last 3 months, I would say, it's been just very nice, uninhibited flow with no pain. So that is one of the fringe benefits of this process, but it's not the only benefit. The overall benefit, like I mentioned, I think, is getting a deeper understanding of ourselves. So with that, let me share this screen and we'll go through a presentation. Okay. Right. So our starting point, as mentioned, is when we're practicing yoga, we're ultimately doing this to see things more clearly, right? We're wanting to understand ourselves, we're wanting to understand the workings of our mind, we're wanting to cut through delusional thinking, we're wanting to develop greater awareness and greater consciousness, wanting to know ourselves, and essentially it's a path of self-inquiry. So with that starting point, as I mentioned, this path that we're going to undertake in terms of understanding the menstrual cycle is really like a yoga, the journey for the yogini. And it's very special because this menstrual cycle, the cycle that we go through each month, is obviously unique to women. So rather than it be something that we should sort of ignore or not think about, or in some cases, when it comes to menstruation, encounter it with feeling like it's uncomfortable or even a sense of dislike, it's actually a wonderful, wonderful path to go deeper into yoga. If we take this as the premise of what we're trying to do with our yoga practice, right? To go deeper into oneself. So our starting point then, the point I'm going to start this is talking about this idea that if you're an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, and I've said this workshop is for Ashtanga yoga practitioners. Who here, is everyone practicing Ashtanga yoga?
Yes.
Yes. If you're not, that's fine. It's relevant to all women and this information, but the context that I'm going to talking from is very kind of specific to Ashtanga yoga, because if you've been practicing Ashtanga yoga, you may have encountered this idea of taking rest. And we hear this on the moon days, okay? So we know that Ashtanga yoga traditionally, many of my new students go through the awkward moment of turning up to the shala and not having checked the moon days, and the shala's closed, and it's always the day that you want to practice the most, and then you look it up and see, oh, it's a moon day. Okay, so traditionally the rest is taken on a new moon and full moon, and there's lots of reasons for this, but particularly because our tradition comes from India, and the guru for Ashtanga yoga actually was very connected to the darshan, the knowledge of Jyotish, which is astrology. So many things were governed by the planets. So it's not uncommon in a country like India, and even actually where I'm speaking from now in Dubai, because actually in Islam, a lunar calendar is followed, and also in Buddhism, and there will be special festivals and events coinciding with the cycle of the moon. So it's normally said that on full moon, energy is higher because there's an upward pull, which is a pranic movement known as prana. And so emotions are heightened. You might feel even like too energized and a bit where we've got electrical lights. This is why sleep is one of the biggest issues that we're facing, people not able to sleep properly, because we've disturbed our circadian rhythms because of modern living, essentially. So we, in our Ashtanga practice, start noticing, and for me, why I feel I want to talk about this is because when I first started practicing, no one really made that link for me. No one was saying, okay, we rest on the moon days, and people would say this because, energy's high on the full moon and energy's low on the moon, but people wouldn't say, and also because it's often the time of menstruation for women. So then we start learning about that at another time when maybe in the shala you've been practicing at, or maybe it might not be until you go somewhere and somebody says, oh no, don't come in on your periods. You take ladies' holiday. It's kind of like a euphemism, and it's a very Indian euphemism, and it's okay. I don't mind using it when I'm in India with my teacher. We can say ladies' holidays, but I prefer not to use ladies' holidays anymore because it is a euphemism, and I don't think we should actually be ashamed of saying, I have my periods, I'm menstruating, I'm bleeding, because that's what I'm doing. And so is 50% of the population. Like, it doesn't need to be like, we don't need to have to feel like, polite about it. And imagine if, that language changed and people just felt open and comfortable to be able, how much that would shift any sense of, shame or embarrassment that's around this topic just by changing the semantics. So I personally don't use the word ladies' holiday, except probably when I'm in India. Okay, so then what would happen is then you've got two choices. Now, firstly, if you're being somebody saying, well, you should take rest. But that's kind of annoying because I don't really like being told what to do. And I don't like when people say you should do something, because then I think, well, why should I? And who are you to tell me? Okay, so then we have this difficult situation. Also, of course, there might be a lot of female practitioners. Someone's raising. But the breath is a conduit for prana. So we work with the breath to access our prana. Okay, so prana is there's a macro expression called prana, and then there's sub-pranas, which are known as the 5 vayus, and vayu is also known as wind. And prana, it's a bit confusing because prana is also one of those subcategories as well. Okay, so this little slide, just these different pranas. So the prana itself is the taking in from outside, and that includes breath, but it also includes senses. So taking in things through the eye and transforming it into thoughts. This is prana, okay? So you can see like how important it is to us. It's basically our connection between our inner world and our outer world. And you can see how important it is to have that flowing smoothly, because if there's blockages, that's essentially, delusional thinking. So we're trying to have that flow to give us clarity to see clearly. So we have the taking in, and then once we take in prana, it needs to be digested, and that's the samana prana. Okay, and that's centered around the center of the body. Then it needs to be circulated, go out to the external limbs, circulated around. Then there's an upward flowing called udana, and that's like our speech. So we take something in, it's processed, it comes out. And then finally, crucial to all of these pranas is the downward flow. So sometimes we can be holding on to things, even the prana is not flowing in the correct way. We're not able to let go of certain things, that apana, like release. And then if we're able to digest, assimilate, and release, then our prana is working in a healthy way. Okay, so it's prana governs not just the physical actions of the body, but also how we experience the world and process the information coming in through our senses. When we practice Ashtanga yoga, we use bandhas. Okay? So you may have learnt these in your yoga class. We have 3 main bandhas, and they're through the central axis of the body. There's actually some people that say there's 9 bandhas because there's a bandha, an energetic lock at every joint in the body. But traditionally, we talk about 3 main ones, particularly when we talk about the flow of energy. So we have our Mula Bandha, which is at the pelvic floor. And you can see, like just from this little diagram, it's moving things up, right? We have the Uddiyana Bandha, which is the upward flying bandha, which is drawing in the lower abdomen. And then our Jalahara Bandha. Okay. Jalahara Bandha is mainly used in pranayama. When we're practicing Ashtanga yoga, we're mainly using the Mula Bandha and the Uddiyana Bandha. So we can then maybe start to deduce that yes, while exercising, while you have your periods, could be absolutely fine, going for a walk and whatever, maybe for those couple of days when we're trying to actually really foster and encourage apana, downward flow of energy, that maybe we would not want to do a practice that's kind of reversing that apana, right? Through the use of bandhas. And when you practice Ashtanga yoga, it's important to practice with bandhas. The bandhas form part of the breathing system. You know, when you're doing your thoracic chest breathing, you're able to direct the prana and the air up into your chest because you've sealed the energy at the base of the body using the Mula Bandha and the Uddiyana Bandha. And then just, of course, in terms of musculoskeletal stability, you know, bandhas are a very stabilizing force with forward bends, twisting, back bending. So when it is talked about take rest during the time of menstruation, this is the reason why. Because in Ashtanga yoga, we practice using these bandhas. And the use of these bandhas for a woman can be disturbing to the apana, which is why some women have encountered losing their cycle through the practice of Ashtanga yoga. Okay? It has happened. Some women have also had difficulty with conception because of the loss of that cycle. So it's not unique to Ashtanga, the use of these bandhas, but what is unique to Ashtanga is this concept of ladies' holiday. And actually, we have to be really grateful for this because our teachers really care about women and were really strict about this because of these reasons. Whereas some other traditions, and in fact, the other book I'm going to reference is Yoni Shakti by Uma Dinsmore Tully. Now, when Uma started writing about this, she came from the Sasanyanda lineage. And there's a lot of pranayama and breath work and chakra meditation and use of bandhas in that lineage. And she would mention that they would often be on workshops in a room of, you know, maybe 40 to 50 women. And if you think how many, you know, out of 40 to 50 women, how many women potentially are menstruating in that group. To harness that apana, the downward flow. And here we are coming and doing something that's sort of counter to that. And I love Uma's writing because she goes one step further. And I mentioned this when I was talking to Adam, I think, on the podcast, and she says that potentially, you know, women, we don't need to be doing all these hardcore breathwork, pranayama activities at that point, because one of the whole purposes of the yoga practice is we're working with the prana and we're working with the energetic pathways, and we're trying to come into the Sushumna Nadi, which is the central nadi, which is, you know, when that is unblocked is when we're open, and we have limitless potential in terms of our breaking free of conditioned thinking. She believes that actually at the time of menstruation, naturally women connect to their Sushumna Nadi. That in fact, the menstruation can be seen as actually an inherent siddhi that exists. A siddhi is a yogic superpower, okay, that women naturally have. And that many of these Hatha yoga practices were perhaps created for men to experience what women actually naturally had within their body. So this is Uma's theory. It's a very interesting one to think about, but it's certainly interesting to think about that the fact that physiologically there is a difference. So then what happens then is then we could then think, okay, that's fine. We need to, I understand the logic of it, of upward flowing, bandhas that send things up, menstruation, we're wanting to send things down. Then we could be stuck with feeling, well, I'm missing out on my practice. And, that's kind of not fair. It doesn't feel fair for women to have to, take a rest or take it easy. So this is where getting a deeper understanding of how just taking that time to disengage from some of these, our traditional yoga practice, like our Ashtanga sequence, can actually open up a whole new world. And in fact, even like deepen our yoga rather than feeling like decorations, you wear different, like it's all by the seasons. Okay, so a winter season. So what happens in winter? Well, you come indoors, you take rest, and essentially you hibernate because you're conserving energy. And why are we doing that when we're menstruating? Because we really want to just facilitate this good menstruation. And like I mentioned today, like when I got my periods today and I could see this lovely, healthy red blood color. If you are somebody who have difficulties with your periods and you're curious as to what is a healthy period, please look at the work of actually, she's also an Ashtanga teacher, and she has a wonderful Instagram, The Period Guru. And she writes a lot about, her name's Jenna, and she writes a lot about, what a healthy period is. Okay, so if you want to go into that in more detail, but certainly it's a nice, rich red blood that comes out without pain. Okay, so we want to honor that and have all our energy going into that it is the time the Sushumna Nadi potentially is more open. You are more connected within yourself, and you do, if you have a spiritual practice, you do have a feeling of being just more connected, let's say, to God or Devi or whoever it is that you connect with. So it is a nice time for being quieter, spending more time there. So if your Ashtanga practice is an hour and a half, then suddenly you've got extra time to do some seated practices like just sitting for meditation. And a number of teachers in terms of the tantric tradition that I study with have been asked this, like, is it okay to do puja? Is it okay to do chanting during the time of menstruation? And the answer is, and this has been from a Western man and an Indian woman, yes, it is okay. It's not that it's unclean. It's just maybe not even necessary. We do all those things to get ourselves aligned and connected. Now, the more you follow this cycle awareness, I tell you, the more you will notice in that time of menstruation, because the little period before the build up to it can be, that's where you've got a bit of angst and you can feel a bit, I'll talk about it in a bit. But when that blood comes and that apana and that dharma flow and that feeling of connection to the earth and then connection to, it's beautiful. I don't even need any practices. I'm there. Enjoy it. So I'm going to miss that if I'm trying to, busy my day with this and this and this and this and this, right? I'm going to miss that special time. Okay, so that might last, you know, a couple of days for the winter. Every woman is different as to how long they bleed for. And then, like what would happen as the snow starts melting, and in Japan, the beautiful cherry blossoms come out, and everyone just starts feeling like that winter lifts, and everyone, and I know you guys have it in the UK as well, because that March is just like so depressing and it's dark, and then it starts changing and spring comes, and suddenly everything that seems so difficult and hard to do, suddenly there's just like new inspiration. So spring, which is your post-period time. So we see here on this little chart here, we've got decay. So that's meaning, and of course, none of these words are negative. Decay is wonderful. We need death, we need decay, we need things to, you know, go down and into the earth. It's part of the process of earth. And then we come out into spring, and that's the time we're planting seeds. Psychologically, it's when you feel like the most inspired, you have new ideas, like suddenly you feel quite creative. You might think of something that you hadn't thought of. Oh, that's a good idea. I think that'll do it. Anything seems possible. And I tell you, the more you have the decay, the more you have the down, the greater ability you have to have the up, and you start noticing. And this springtime just it's just wonderful. And that's if you're a business owner, it can be a really smart time to do your planning for the month, sow those seeds, literally sow the seeds for ideas. It might be, you might then start making some calls with some friends about doing some social things in the coming weeks, you know, planting those seeds as well. Okay. So it's pre-ovulation, this period. And in the moon, if some women menstruate at new moon and some menstruate at full moon, there's no right or wrong. I've obviously done today, so I'm not even with the moons at the moment. It's sort of switching. But many women, majority, if they line up with the moons, it would be new moon, okay? And then the moon starts growing. We're calling it waxing. It's literally growing in intensity to come up to the full moon of the summer period, which is the time of ovulation. Now, summer is when you are just the most productive time of the month. So all those plans you made in spring, they're starting to come to fruition now. And I used to always observe this myself, like, why sometimes I'm just so productive? Like, I'm just like, my time to withdraw. Just be patient, wait. You know, I'll be in my summer soon. So my husband's very well versed in this now. And it's a blessing, really is. I tell you, I almost feel like it was like a wonderful thing to bring into our marriage, this understanding. Okay. So summer, of course, what happens after summer, what goes up must come down. So productive, we start moving into the autumn period, which, like all the seasons, are just as essential as each other. We can't have spring without autumn. We can't have summer without winter. But probably autumn is maybe the period that could be sometimes the most challenging for women. This is traditionally where you have what people call PMS. Now, I'm not going to call it PMS because it's sounding like PMS is a syndrome, like it's a problem. It's not a problem. Okay, it's just, you know, what it is a problem if there's extreme pain and whatever, we want to solve that. But we shouldn't have to feel like women that it's not okay to go through this sort of contraction feeling that can happen during the autumn period, because that's what's essentially happening. We start withdrawing in, getting ready for winter. And what happens is that we start feeling a little bit like because we're getting ready for winter, we don't have time for, the expression I'd say would be, we don't suffer fools. We don't suffer fools. And that's why sometimes a woman in the autumn period can be a little, and it can be very powerful because quite often as women, we maybe don't speak our truth as much as we should. And sometimes people do need to be told certain things, but we don't feel like we've got the confidence to do it. Well, in that autumn period, it just comes, right? And it can be, and when it comes in a balanced, way, when you've really connected with that, we call this autumn period the wise woman. So these cycles correspond not just to the monthly cycle, but the seasons also to a woman's life, right? You have, as a teenage woman coming into puberty, menstruating for the first time is your spring. You have your fertile years, childbearing, childbearing, summer, and then menopause. And this is often where women in our modern day society are like relegated out to the side, right? Post 50, you're not having children anymore, you're going through menopause. No one's looking forward to that because our society doesn't accept it. Because our society just really wants to, we don't even want to see people in that summer anymore. I think people only wants to see people women in the spring. But the autumn period, that wise woman, like, if you've got mentors or like women in your life who are in that period, that these women are so valuable. Some of my, senior yoga teachers who are in that time. Most self-doubt, the most negative talk. So like anything, when you shine the spotlight of awareness on something, it just diminishes. When you see it for what it is and put it in context, it loses its power. So when this is my autumn, this is when my inner critic comes out the strongest. Thank you, wise woman, that's in your voice, in my head. Like, yes, some of the things you're saying, I'm going to take on board. Some of the things I think is just because you're feeling a bit, uncertain this period. So I'm just going to take that, everything with a grain of salt. For me, I found this just mind-blowing information because that inner critic would come along, and up until this time, I wasn't tracking it and connecting it to this period. It would just be these, random feelings of self-doubt. And now to just see it for what it is and know, okay, I know you for who you are, and I know you will pass. That's the thing with this connecting into a cycle. It's one of the greatest teachings we have in our yoga practice, that everything is always changing. Nothing is permanent, okay? Then we're starting to prepare and we come back into our winter. So like, how amazing we go on this journey every month. So one of the ways to really connect with this that I definitely recommend, and this came from Alexandra Pope's book, is to create a cycle awareness diary and do this for at least 3 months. And you take the first day of menstruation as your day 1, and then you go day 2. So firstly, it's great if you're not keeping track of the cycle to actually just see when you're ovulating, when you're having your periods. And then, but the main thing, you also just write a few sentences each day about your mood, your energy levels, and you start tracking it. And you do it in you're not trying to, necessarily you're not trying to make it fit to that seasons. It doesn't have to fit to that. You're doing your own study into your own self. And the great thing is because you're already Ashtanga yoga practitioners, you're kind of used to doing this. This is what we do, right? We practice every day. So we're already doing this. We're already, every day you notice, oh, this felt like this and this felt like this. So now this just adds another dimension because you can see, oh, okay. So interestingly, I felt, like I was like doing all these great lift up and jumps throughs, and oh, interesting, like that's like right over my spring and summer. And oh, my back was feeling like not so great. Maybe that was just because I was about to get my periods or something. You can just start seeing these patterns. So then what that does is it really helps with your practice because it just takes the pressure off you. Because so often we can be wondering, oh, why am I feeling like this and why am I feeling like that? And the answer is, well, because I'm human for one, and secondly, I'm woman. And I have a womb, that's doing these amazing things, and I want to use my yoga practice to support that, not to take away from it, not to think I need to just be do. And in fact, we don't want anyone to be mechanical in their yoga practice. Yoga is about, as we said at the beginning, developing greater awareness and greater understanding of our own selves, right? So the combining the awareness of the cycle with the Ashtanga yoga practice, boom, it's like fantastic. It's to be then not viewing like, oh, those 3 days where I'm not practicing my Ashtanga is not